There is a kind of damnation that needs no fire, no demons, no thrones of judgment. It happens every time you walk into a room and feel that you have ceased to be someone, becoming instead only what others see. Because hell, for Sartre, is not a place underground. It is the stage where the self dies in the eyes of the other. And perhaps you are already there, sitting, playing the role expected of you, while deep inside, your essence dissolves in silence. Because to be seen by eyes that do not understand you is a kind of pain that language cannot yet describe. An involuntary exposure, a forced nakedness, a soul invaded. Hell, then, is not a place. It is a scene, a prison without bars, but full of spectators. And what imprisons you is not the cell, it is the applause. Because when you begin to live according to what others think of you, authenticity becomes theater, free will becomes costume, and the freedom that once felt absolute disappears like smoke. You no longer choose, you react. You do not decide, you respond. You do not live, you perform. And thus, you become a prisoner of a self you did not build, but that was imposed, expected, modeled. This is hell, to be eternally the expectation of someone else. And if you look around, you'll see that you are surrounded by profiles, by characters, by bodies walking as if free, but carrying on their shoulders the invisible weight of judgment. People who no longer think about being, but only about appearing. People who smile when they want to scream, who post while falling apart, who applaud while choking on their own hypocrisy. Because in Sartre's hell, there are no chains, only selfies. There is no torment, only performance. And every like is another brick in the cell of their own soul. And every silence swallowed to avoid displeasing someone is a fire lit in the conscience. Hell is that place where shame comes not from guilt, but from exposure. Where what hurts is not what you did, but what others think you are. And in this infernal logic, truth becomes dangerous because it can shatter the image others have already built of you. That is why we choose the disguise. That is why we hide our wounds, paint ourselves with certainties, build stage settings. Because the worst kind of loneliness is being misunderstood in the presence of someone who should have understood you. So you close off, fall silent, adapt. And with each adaptation, another piece of your freedom dies. And when you finally realize it, you no longer remember who you were before needing to please. Sartre described this with brutal clarity. Hell is other people. Not because others are evil, but because in their gaze you are deformed. The other becomes a distorted mirror, an invisible judge, a permanent spectator. And it is there, in contact with that gaze that defines you without knowing you, that you begin to disappear. Not gradually, but silently and brutally. You are still alive, but you no longer belong to yourself. And that, for Sartre, is the essence of damnation, to exist, but not to own yourself. And the tragedy is that everyone wants to be loved, but few are prepared to be truly seen. Because to be seen is to be revealed. And who can endure seeing their own soul naked in front of eyes that do not love? So we hide behind versions of ourselves built not to live, but to survive. And thus, hell evolves. It no longer burns with fire, but with empty smiles. It no longer scorches with flames, but with gazes that judge, with words that control, with silences that accuse. Perhaps hell, then, is not punishment. Perhaps it is simply consequence of a life that chose to please everyone, except oneself. Of a heart that bowed so much to the gaze of others that it forgot its own reflection. Of a soul that asked for acceptance, but received applause, and mistook that for love. And so, hell is built not by God, but by ourselves, brick by brick, mask by mask, gaze by gaze. The cruelest torment of Sartre's hell is not the punishment imposed from the outside in, but the suffering born within oneself when you begin to live under the eyes of others, as if those eyes were the final measure of your existence. And every time you yield to their expectations, a part of who you could have been is murdered. Not with physical violence, but with the slow poison of silent renunciation. You renounce yourself from the inside, but continue smiling on the outside. You abandon your truest impulses to follow the script of approval, and that abyss between who you are and who you present yourself to be becomes so deep that even God, if he looked, would hesitate to recognize you. Hell, then, is not a distant kingdom. It is the stage where your real self is locked behind the curtain while the mask takes center stage. And the audience applauds, always applauds, because the world loves characters more than it loves people. The world adores versions, cutouts, filters, and in this theater, the more successful you appear, the further you drift from the truth of yourself. And when you try to return, you realize the door was locked from the inside, by you, because the freedom you traded for applause now demands a price: existential emptiness. Sartre perceived the horror of this. The gaze of the other becomes a lens that distorts, a beam of light that both reveals and burns. And even if you try to hide, it's too late. You've been seen. And from that moment, you begin to exist as an object in someone else's consciousness. Not as a being, but as a thing that must meet expectations, satisfy desires, avoid rejection. You become a product, a package, a display. And in this process, you lose your soul like someone losing a breath in a cave with no echo. And the most ironic part? Sometimes, hell is found in the people closest to you. Those who say they love you, but only know how to love the version of you they created in their minds. Those who call you by name, but expect you never to change, never to defy the role they assigned to you. These are the most decorated cells in hell. The relationships where you cannot be truthful without risking abandonment. So you pretend, and call it peace, call it maturity, but it is imprisonment. It is emotional mutilation disguised as stability. It is hell with rugs and sofas, and then you realize, hell is not just other people because they judge you. Hell is other people because when you start to live through them, you no longer live in yourself. Your identity becomes a collage of glances, and each of those glances is a pair of scissors cutting away another piece of your wholeness, until one day you look in the mirror and see no one, not because you vanished, but because you never truly appeared. And at that moment, the only escape would be a scream, a raw, brutal, authentic scream, but who still has a voice after so long being silenced? Who still has the courage to break the silence when everyone seems comfortable in the lie? Who still dares to tear the costume in the middle of the masquerade? Few. Very few. And those who do are usually seen as dangerous, inconvenient, mad, because they dared not to be what was expected of them, because they decided to set the stage on fire rather than decorate it. The greatest illusion of human freedom is not being confined by external bars, but by invisible chains that form inside the mind every time the desire to be accepted becomes greater than the courage to be truthful. Because when you hand over to others the power to define who you are, you transform them into your jailers, even if you smile at them every day. And there is a multitude of the condemned living like this, well-dressed, well-connected, well-adjusted, but spiritually shackled, emotionally displaced, existentially exhausted. They don't wear rags, but costumes that keep them inside the play. That play where being honest is dangerous, where showing weakness is failure, where taking off the mask is a symbolic suicide. Sartre did not speak of a mystical hell, but of a daily, real, tangible damnation, where you become a slave to the character you created for yourself and from which you no longer know how to escape. And the most perverse part is that this prison is voluntary, disguised as social success. You're praised for keeping up appearances, promoted for sticking to the script, admired for maintaining the mask. But inside, you die a little more every day, because what you are and what you portray are growing further apart. And no one survives that division for long without falling into despair or cynicism. Existential anguish doesn't come from a lack of meaning, but from the continuous presence of a self that is not you. And when the gaze of the other becomes the final criterion for all your decisions, what you wear, what you post, what you suppress, then you are no longer living, you are being lived. You no longer inhabit your identity, only its facade. And what is that, if not a psychological hell? An inner prison with walls made of approval and a ceiling made of shame. Hell is not just the place where the wicked go. It can also be the space where the good lose themselves trying to look perfect. Sartre points out that man is condemned to freedom, and that freedom, when not lived with authenticity, turns into self-deception. And self-deception is a grave dug with your own hands, where everything you truly desire to become is buried. Hell is not being able to choose anymore. It is waking up every day and playing a role you once created, but that now oppresses you. It is looking in the mirror and not recognizing yourself, or worse, recognizing only the image that others have projected onto you. And in that moment, hell becomes total, because there is no escape from something you built yourself. There is no exorcism for a demon wearing your face and using your name. You might even change cities, switch careers, reinvent your appearance, but as long as your soul is captive to the opinions of others, you remain trapped in the same cycle. Because psychological hell travels with you, and it doesn't matter how high you rise, how much you conquer, how brightly you shine, the gaze of the other will still be there, like a shadow glued to your skin, like a curse whispering, "Be what they expect of you, not what you are." And that is why there is so much sadness hidden behind success, so much depression behind stages, so much anguish in the middle of crowds. Because hell doesn't scream. It corrodes silently. And the more you adapt, the more you lose yourself. Until one day you realize that what they called you never existed. It was just reflection, just reflection, just reflection. And true hell is this: to be a reflection forever. No body, no soul, no true name. Just an echo of what others projected. And no one can live as a shadow without eventually wishing to disappear completely, because the emptiness of being no one weighs more than any flame. And what if hell is exactly that? A crowded theater where no one dares to go off script, where everyone pretends to be fine while carrying the unbearable weight of never being allowed to be real. And what if the loudest cry of hell is not a scream of pain, but the silence of conformed souls, those who agreed to live fully only on the inside, because outside there was no room left for truth? This is the kind of damnation that requires no demons, just a system that rewards appearances, a society that replaced freedom with performance, a crowd that no longer distinguishes authenticity from convenience. Sartre saw what few dared to face, that there is no punishment more refined than a life lived to please, because such a life is long, well-dressed, applauded, but it is hollow. And there is no more effective hell than one where you smile every day, but cry every night without knowing why. Because the lie you've embodied became too comfortable to undo, and the fear of rejection outweighs the desire to be free. So you continue, day after day, performing, until the soul grows weary, until the spirit recedes, until all that's left is the echo of who you used to be. And that is why Sartre's hell is so devastating. It doesn't come all at once. It builds itself. It starts with small silences, small concessions, small disguises, and before you know it, you are entirely inside a character that no longer remembers your name. You become what others want to see, and forget who you were meant to become. And this, for Sartre, is the final damnation. Not because someone condemned you, but because you built every brick of your own prison, with fear, with vanity, with the need for approval. But there might perhaps be a way out. And it doesn't come from revolt, but from lucidity, from the courage to tear off the costume, to look in the mirror and say, enough. I am not what they expect. I am not what they project. I am, even in ruins, someone who chooses. And that choice, even if it comes late, even if it is imperfect, is already a spark of redemption. Because hell cannot withstand authenticity. Hell despises those who dare to be real. And perhaps, just perhaps, the only way to escape hell is to die to the invented version of yourself, and finally be born into the truth no one applauds, but that sets you free. Sartre may have said that hell is other people, but maybe hell is living as others expect you to. and never as you were, called to be. Because in the end, true freedom does not lie in being accepted. It lies in no longer needing to be.